Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Gary Fox, and we're going to be talking today about user retention, user acquisition, product strategy, and marketing. Just do a brief round of introductions. My name is Gary Fox. I'm an electrical engineer by training with a background in economics as well. And I've been mostly a product manager throughout my career, working at Sonos, Bosch, Motional on Robotaxi, and most recently Outrider, which is automated driving for yard trucks and distribution centers. So operating trucks in private spaces in the logistics business. And Jeffrey, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good to be here. I had the shortest walk. It looks like all the Boston folks are virtual, though. Gary made it all the way from Denver. Similar to Gary, I've been in product my whole career. Double E also, by training, was a tech guy early on, switched over to the business side, did a number of startups here in Boston. My whole career has been in Boston on the startup scene. Lotus Development early, and started a company in the early days of the commercial internet, e-room technology, that was a great success here in Boston. Full disclosure, I did a stint as a venture capitalist. Realized I'm wired as an entrepreneur, wired as a product guy, so I went back. We can talk about that offline if you'd like. Today, I'm actually a general partner at Venture Lane around the corner here, B2B technology-focused accelerator. Get to work with some pretty amazing early-stage companies in the B2B space. Keeps me young, gives me... my lens is around product and how does product enable growth.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And next we have Jordan.
Hello, I'm Jordan Bonds, and I am currently the Director of Product Strategy at a product consultancy called ThoughtBot, which originally started here in Boston 20 years ago, but is a global company now. My path to this role, going backwards in time, I am a two-time founder. I was a first head of product at two other early stage startups. And then the first 10 years of my career, I was a software engineer. So that's me. I've done B2B stuff. I've done B2C stuff, all quite early stage. So that's my focus.
Thanks, Jordan. And now we have Brian.
Hi, everyone. Brian D'Souza here. Currently, I lead product marketing and customer marketing here at a company called Aptiv. We build AI software, machine learning hardware for all things that makes cars really, really smart. And prior to here, I was leading product marketing and marketing at an AI robotics company called Berkshire Grey. Currently, we recently got into an acquisition with SoftBank, if I remember correctly. And prior to that, I was leading product marketing at Grammarly. I was responsible for our B2B product there, where we launched Grammarly Business, taking Grammarly user and professional into the business enterprise world. That was a fun experience. But I tell people I technically grew up at Microsoft. I was there for some 8 odd years, started off as a product manager in the e-commerce realm, and then moved into product marketing for Office 365, Microsoft Teams, and Microsoft 365, which is it was the first bundle product, so to speak, in the productivity realm, where we bundled Windows, Office, and Dynamics all together. And my last gig at Microsoft was product marketing in Azure Data and AI. I was responsible for our open source products and AI services. So yeah, it's been a software nerd for a while. Dabbled into hardware, robotics, now a little bit into software and hardware. But yeah, just been around the product context, so to speak, in AI and machine learning for quite some time. That's me.
Thanks very much, Brian. All right, so let's get right to it. Hopefully we have a great series of questions. So we're talking about acquiring users. We're talking about retaining users. Let's start with acquisitions. How can our existing users help us acquire new users?
I'll take that one first, and then folks online join me. Early on in my career, somehow I got involved in the collaborative software space, and I've kind of wired inside of team-focused software, people working together. So there's a little bit caution of that's my lens on this, and I'll tee up a couple ways that existing users can help you get other users, but you know, we'll open it up after that. My favorite way is that it's actually built into the product natively, that there's a natural reason for people to bring other people to work with them on that product. That works in collaborative software, that works in a lot of different software. It doesn't work in every piece of software. Way back in the day, we actually trademarked something called electronic word of mouth. This was long before virality existed and long before referrals existed, electronic word of mouth. So first is direct through the product. I think we're probably also all familiar with incentives that encourage us to bring other users in. Sometimes those are monetary, sometimes not. Even if the monetary amount is not large, sometimes they can influence behavior. I mean, I was the first to get my free 1,000 miles on my Tesla by inviting others in. Did it make a difference financially? No, but for some reason I was willing to kind of invite others and do Elon's bidding. Don't know if I do that today. Sorry, won't go there. My favorite one though is when you can delight users to the point they love your product so much they have to tell others about it. I'm curious in the audience, do any of you have products you love so much that you actually talk to people about it and encourage them to try it? Show of hands. Yeah, pretty powerful, isn't it? Why do we do that? I'm not quite sure what the innate human behavior is there, but maybe it's ego, maybe it's being the expert, maybe it's just sharing the good when you find something that's wonderful. I have been a long-time Quicken user. The early days of Quicken was not a great product. It was pretty painful. Every upgrade was painful. I got reintroduced to Quicken for the Mac recently. It is the most spectacular piece of software I've used in a long time. And I get a chance to tell everybody about that, and I don't get paid for it. Anybody here Quicken Mac users? One or two. Do you agree? Not as enthusiastic for each of us. To Brian and Jordan. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say I've grown up in the era of well, maybe at this cusp of when products started getting into this subscription model world, and CLTV and all these customer lifetime value and these kinds of metrics have been gaining a lot of traction. And now when it's funny, now when I say customer lifetime value to some of the startups I mentor, they look at me like I'm a 90s kid, which I am, but it's like, whoa, you're like totally like dated yourself with that metric. But no, totally agree. I feel like, right now, when you think of users, I love that we are going into a world where the user journey is just as important, if not more important than user actions, right? Which is understanding the context of the user in a non-creepy way, understanding how the user goes about a certain value chain where your product can play a role. And instead of forcing the user to understand how to use your product and why your product can help them solve issues, meeting the user where they're at. And that means having a very deep understanding of their psychographics, demographics, purchasing behavior, usage behavior, and so on. And so it's bringing a new level of what I'd like to call user intimacy, that users feel like they can trust a product if the product understands them well, aka you understand them well. So I love seeing the trend in this regard. But yeah, Jordan, feel free to add on anything you'd like.
Yeah, I would just add, I agree with everything said already, and I would just add that it's important to sort of think about the connections between your current users and who they might bring along really strategically. So that starts with who you're targeting as an early adopter. If you are hoping to have some kind of like collaboration in the app or word of mouth marketing, you want to make sure that those folks you're targeting first are the kinds of people who would talk about an app they're using. Often I see folks start with a beachhead that might be a really good natural user for their product, but are never going to recruit other people because they just don't have that profile, right? So going after the folks who are, team builders, they're extroverted in a certain way, right? They're gonna bring people along. It's important to think about that strategically, and then to really connect those dots for them, which this just builds on what Brian was saying, that you don't want them to have to guess or to figure it out on their own, and you want the beats of that journey to feel like you've anticipated their every emotion. And in that regard, you want these early adopters to immediately find value in what you've built in and of itself. And then the next beat should be some natural moment at which that they would share, right? So maybe there's something they've done. They're like, that was great. That really helped me out. And perhaps it like creates an asset or something that is like a great thing for them to post about somewhere. Like look for those opportunities to really like tell the story in a way that just makes sense, where they don't have to think about it, right? I mean, we've all had the opposite experience where we get dropped into I'm also a software person, so I'm going to talk about software, but you get dropped into some interface and you don't know what you're supposed to do there. Like, okay, I just got through creating a profile and there's like no value proposition that immediately appears. Like that's a fail on the part of product makers. But then when there's not an obvious moment when I would share that connects the dots for me. So, maybe I do immediately get to value, but there's just sort of like it ends there. There's the experience does not lead me to a place where I would, I got value. And now there's an obvious moment when I would invite my team members, or there's an obvious moment when I would post about what I just did in this app to Instagram or something. Like, you have to really bring people along. They are not living inside of this app the way that you are, dear founder. And they're not going to be able to connect those dots for themselves. So the experience of using it really needs to like thread that needle, and it's important to think about it strategically.
So it sounds like the sort of arc of the product should include these kind of moments that allow people to have a sort of identification time, and then they're either going to have a direct call to action, or maybe they just love it so much that they're going to want to share, but they're sort of like really thinking about the entire story there. So Jordan, continuing on this line here, suppose we're going to talk about acquiring users in the first place. What acquisition tactics have worked best for you as a product leader? And how might this be applicable or not applicable to another startup, given the kind of problem you're solving and the kind of product you're building?
Yeah. Really depends on what you're doing and for whom. I'll just give a couple of a sort of array of these tactics at startups I've worked on, just to give you a taste of how it really is very idiosyncratic to who you're serving, where they hang out, and what it is what the solution is. My most recent startup was a voice messaging platform, and we were finding a lot of traction with folks running their first marathon. The dynamics of the app just made it so that the app could function as a sort of virtual cheering squad for folks who couldn't be race side cheering you on. You could have them in your ears cheering you on, which is fantastic, and actually became like a really great, like our best acquisition channel was to show up at marathons and like an hour early and be like, hey, install this app, invite your family to use it and cheer you on while you're running. It was just the most fantastic. And that is, do not be afraid to just get out there where your users are, meet them where they are at the moment they are going to be wanting the thing that you've made, and get it in their hands. Be as scrappy about it as you possibly can. So that's one end. You may also find that people are actually, if you're doing a B2B solution, people might literally be Googling, for help with the problem that you're solving. A Google ad is a perfectly appropriate thing to acquire users if that's the case. It's just about where they are. Maybe they're not doing that though yet. Maybe this is a nascent pain point and people are talking about it on Reddit. Cool. If you're building a personal finance app, go to the personal finance subreddit, hang out, answer questions for people. Like, if it gets to the point where it's like you cannot withhold your solution from them any longer, suggest it. It's really about finding the folks where they are, meeting them there, providing value. It's not about the hard sell, though, early on. This really is way more about letting people know you exist and that you're solving their problems in the moment that they're having them. And it's just very, very idiosyncratic to what that is. That there are also, as one more example from my own experience, cold outreach can work really well if it's appropriate. If folks have a problem, it is not at a place where they are articulating it well to themselves. As an example, one of the startups that I worked on early on was providing COVID testing events for Hollywood productions, right? This was a brand new pain point. This was 2020. This was a brand new pain point. Everybody was figuring it out. And we had to go to those folks and let them know that we existed because they wouldn't have known otherwise. So it's very idiosyncratic to your early adopters, where they are, the solution you're providing. And I guess I cannot stress enough that you should meet them there and speak about the problem the way they're speaking about it.
Oh, thanks. Jeffrey, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm struck a little bit, Jordan. I might challenge you a little bit because I work with a fair number of startups that aren't certain who their ideal first customer is. And they're in that experimentation phase, or they're in I got to try a bunch of things to see what works and doesn't work. So I'm curious how you figured out marathon runners would be an ideal target. My guess, it was an accident, right? It wasn't thoughtful, but.
Well, I'll answer that question. And I completely agree with you. I'm talking about once you've figured out what
once you figure it out.
Persona, right? Sure. When you're figuring, I mostly hang out these days in the space where we haven't figured it out yet. So if we want to talk about that, happy to talk about that. But with regard to the marathon runners, the Holler Hype's founder was a marathon runner, a long distance runner, and she had this idea specifically for that niche use case as a beachhead. So.
Love it.
Which was great. She and this is another thing I counsel founders all the time. It's, there's a kind of push and pull with that. Sometimes founders get into this. I was this founder actually with the first startup I founded, where I thought there were more people like me out there than there actually were. Whoops, might be you. But Emily, the founder of the CEO of Holler Hype, she was a long distance runner. In college, she had suffered some injuries and was doing a lot of training in the gym and wasn't with her team and wasn't hearing from people. And she was just like, I have an iPhone. I have earbuds. Wouldn't it be fantastic if I could just let people know when I'm running and they could send me a thing? And then she was like, well, let's see how big this market would be and whether there are adjacent markets that this would be valuable to. And that's really the equation you need to get to next. But I agree with you, Jeffrey, that it's not often who you think it is, first of all. It's true. Not often you. And I often counsel folks, find a group of people that you love talking to and listening to, and just listen to what their problems are and solve problems for them. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're solving problems for people you don't empathize with. It's going to be tough.
A couple things just to pile on there. Early on, maybe our lens is startup. We're startup. The product's not complete. We know there are holes in the product. It's not going to do everything you want it to do. And as product managers, you have to be able to make that trade-off. You got to figure out it does something really well, even with the imperfections, and who is it going to do that well for? So I know we're going to get later into kind of how do we get user input into it, but opening up your ears and listening, to Jordan's point, where you're hearing people tell you about your product and what's special about it. You're only going to be able to incorporate that if your ears are open, you're listening, you're testing in lots of places, you're trying things, and you're okay with failure, because a lot of those, they may not work. So you're going to have to kind of get your product out there, realize, ooh, we can't go to enterprise Fortune 500 until we have A, B, and C. Probably would never recommend you start with a Fortune 500 in an early stage. But listen to hear, maybe there's something fabulous about what your product does, and they're willing to overlook the imperfections, overlook the holes that exist naturally in early stage products.
Hard anecdote on my part, company I advise, EV Match. Paul Graham says your first 1,000 customers, you're going to hand sign them up. So you don't say, do you want to try this product? You want to sign up? Give me your laptop. I will put in your email and click confirm and all that stuff. So there's our signed up. We went to Earth Day fairs and electric car meetups and found these kind of first best customers. So kind of moving on to another phase of this thing. So suppose we have some customers and we want to make sure we keep them because your metrics, as discussed in other panels, sometimes talking about lifetime value of the customer. So what kind of retention tactics work best for you as a product leader, and how might that be applicable or not to a particular startup, given what it is you're working on? Brian?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gary. Thanks. And so, retention, to put this in an answer that doesn't consume the rest of this time, is not a one size fits all. Retention methodologies include, the classic, most popular one, which I think Amazon made really popular, is when you try to, cancel your Prime membership. It'll, in many ways, it asks you, really? Are you sure? Really? 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 So, but I'm oversimplified that obviously, but brings up like different other alternatives, or even says like, hey, take another month off, and try it out, or a reduced rate or tier, and so on. But I guess the meta point here is that, as I said, retention is not a one size fits all. It is very, very closely linked to how well and how regularly do you ensure that your user is understanding the value of your product. This depends on the problem. It depends on the solution that you're providing. But as an example, I'll say this, like, so at Grammarly, a lot of people use Grammarly, and in Grammarly business, a lot of professionals use Grammarly. And I remember one of the discussions we were having way back when was, how can we ensure that, as much as we want to make the product disappear in the background, right? Not in your face all the time, but how do we ensure that when time comes for renewal, that the value of the product is known, and that people want to renew pretty quickly, and in ideal cases, increase to a higher paying tier, right? It was a really interesting discussion, because for us, it was important that the customer or the user continues using the product, and then when it comes for renewal, it's almost like we wanted them to have this wow factor, like, whoa, I didn't even know I was using this. Like, yeah, I'm up for renewal, and but it has been a credible part of our user journey. So that's one part. The second part is, obviously, when it comes to renewal, provided you don't have any price changes going on, it should be pretty straightforward if the user is a heavy user and you're seeing strong active usage and adoption metrics there. But one, and this is probably a personal opinion, it is a personal opinion, which is, always time your price changes, especially if their price increases, in a methodical, thoughtful way, and not when it's during renewal season for most of your users. Or give them the opportunity to stick with their current tier, so long as they don't feel they're getting shafted in a way to get into this new pricing tier. But yeah, I don't think it needs to be overcomplicated. I think when we overcomplicate, users get a little jittery. I knew the product I was using. I knew how I was purchasing it, what I was buying it for. Now I'm getting a lot more into it. Even if the price is the same and you try to overemphasize your marketing speak, people feel like, whoa, I think you're setting me up for like a price increase, or like I might be paying something more for something down the line. So, simplicity is key in that regard too. But I'll stop with this one point, which is, this was I won't say which product, but learned this very early in my career, is that, retention is not a methodology of saying, buy my product again or renew it. it is also an opportunity to check in with your user, to be, hey, we've seen you've been using this product really closely. Thank you for using it. You're coming up for renewal, but besides that, how are things going? Or like, and I know you cannot do this for every user, but some sort of way of using this event as a way to understand from the user even more as to what are they liking about the product, what don't they like about the product, and using it as a way of gathering feedback. I have seen this work so well where the user feels like, yeah, it's not a retention event. It is an opportunity where they're trying to understand how I'm enjoying the product or what feedback I have for it. Oh, and by the way, yes, I'm coming up for renewal. So I've seen that work really well, and do it obviously in a thoughtful and intentional way, not not to fake it, so to speak. But yeah, I'll end with that one note, that it's important to not just let it be a retention event, but to put this user at the center of what you're trying to understand about them.
Jeffrey, during your time as in the venture business, surely you've seen a number of businesses, startups come through trying to emphasize retention. What did you learn from them, and what do you tell them?
You'll have investors ask you questions like, what's your moat? What is it that keeps users locked into your product so that they can't leave? I think, to Brian's point, that's one approach, and I think I would challenge that. Investors do want to see that there's a lifetime value of a customer, and that there's a predictable duration that a customer stays with you. But there's two ways to do that. There's building lock-in and proprietary, and perhaps making it hard to cancel, a la Amazon. And Brian was also alluding to this. There's how about delighting the user and building loyalty and making them want to stay? What are the tactics that we could use that build the loyalty with your users? And it's about, I'm going to go back to what we were saying earlier. It's about listening to your users and hearing where their needs are and anticipating their needs and being responsive to them. Also, not treating them like a large mass group. To the extent that we can individualize it and make me feel special as a user of your product, that's a very powerful tool to build loyalty and keep users on your platform if possible. I had an experience very early in my career where we were capturing user feedback in the product, and we were identifying, because we could back then, the users and where the feedback came from. We captured their email address, and we logged every bit of feedback that we had. And then as we built the product over time and we shipped some of those capabilities, we went back to the users that had asked for certain capabilities. And we said, guess what? We just shipped this product. You might be interested, or this feature. You might be interested in trying this. The reaction to that was remarkable, because nobody does that. How often have you been reached out to by a company? 2 years ago, you asked for this capability. It took us a little while, but we just shipped it. Rare. It's an opportunity to differentiate yourself, build loyalty, build the user feedback into your process. So I err more on the side of build loyalty, build delight, have a user want to stay, versus lock them in, build moats, make it hard for them to leave.
I see. So this actually gets to an interesting tension point. Often our first best customers are going to feel the discomfort, are going to experience the problem most acutely that your product purports to solve. And they're going to advocate on your behalf, as we talked about, but they're also super fans. They're super fans, and that has positives and it has negatives as well. So how do you balance the feedback from these super fans, the ones that are posting, the ones that are filling out the surveys, versus maybe the majority that maybe experiences the problem a little bit differently? I guess we'll go to you here, Jordan.
I'm going to answer that. I want to go back to the question about retention really quickly, just to say one of my favorite things to point out, which is that retention begins with onboarding. And this, I think, just completely builds upon everything that Jeffrey and Brian were saying. But like, you have an opportunity to start building that delight and engagement and feeling of being seen and understood the minute someone starts using your product, and that really builds the foundation upon which retention is executed. So like think about retention with your onboarding experience. But okay, so the question was about, sorry.
The question is about the question is about how do you find that balance between listening too much to your customers?
Yes. Okay.
Particularly
Right.
Certain customers.
100%. 100%. So always what I go back to here is who is your best customer and why? And sometimes your loudest customer is not your best customer. And you wanna take their feedback, take any user's feedback with a grain of salt, which is they're going to ask you for specific features, but your job is always to figure out what problem they're trying to solve. They're going to have product ideas for you. That's great. That's interesting. Respond with curiosity about what it is they're trying to do and why, and then do the internal work to figure out how that fits into your ideal customer persona and your strategy around that, right? So these folks who are very loud and very engaged may or may not be your best customer. It's tough. I want to acknowledge it's really hard, especially early on when winning every single user or every customer feels like a prize that you had to fight really hard for. You end up sometimes with an array of customer types, and you cannot serve them all well, right? You're not going to solve everybody's problems perfectly everywhere all the time to start. You have meager resources. You really need to focus on a specific customer or user profile and a specific problem that they have. And so you might be hearing a lot of feedback from people that are just not that person. And it takes a lot of fortitude, courage in a way, to say no, or just, I always frame it as not yet, to say not yet to a certain set of folks around what they're asking for, because you know it isn't strategically a good idea for you. Again, that doesn't mean no forever. And it doesn't mean you aren't polite and engaged with them, but you really, it's if you're hearing a ton of different things or a bunch of things that are coming out of left field, it suggests to me that our team is lacking customer focus, and we need to find that. Who are we serving right now, first and foremost, and why? And then once you kind of zoom in that way, and you start to hear patterns, it really does go back to, listen past the feature request to what problem is being addressed, right? People will say, well, I really need this button to be over here. Okay, tell me more about that. Why does the button need to be over there? Tell me more about the workflow that resulted in you being frustrated by this button. And often you'll uncover a much better solution than the one that a user or a customer is going to directly suggest to you. I mean, there's, probably folks have heard these stories of if Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, not a car. And, years and years later, nobody was asking for an iPhone, but when Apple came out with one, it was a hit, those kinds of things. And they ring true. Like what you're trying to get, you're the innovator, right? Your user has problems to be solved, jobs to be done. And it's your task to listen for those, and to really dig in and respond with curiosity. And I will say, with regard to that building loyalty, especially I find this with B2B products, when you listen, when you respond with curiosity, when someone makes a suggestion to you for a feature, and you write back and say, I'd love to talk to you more about this. Can you tell me, about the rest of what's going on when you hit this problem? People just love being heard. And often no one wants to listen to them, the problems that they have, and much less solve them. And you really endear yourself to your, as a company, to your user and your customer when you just listen with deep curiosity, and you aren't prescriptive, you're empathetic. That is what builds loyalty. So yeah, it's about focusing on the right folks and the right problem that the problem that you're solving for them, and sort of clearing away the rest of the noise and responding with curiosity to those things.
I am a user of a early product right now, and their customer retention team reached out to me as they realized I was about to churn, and they said, "Why is that?" Happy to speak more about that afterwards. It was really fascinating. I really resonate with those comments about just having that curiosity, understanding the person's problem. The faster horse thing is a real thing. I deal with it all the time. A customer wants this thing, but they don't really want that. They want something solved. And what they may ask for may or may not actually serve the rest of your customer base. They just customers are good at what they're doing. They're not product designers. They might be, but they're probably not.
I had a contractor once, just to put a point on this one, and in a not polite way, he said to me, "Tell me what you're trying to do, not how to do it." So I think there's a pause that we as product people need to get behind the scenes and really trying to understand what's trying to be accomplished. Because it's also, we don't want to build for one, we want to build for many. And you're going to learn more about, oh, I could generalize that, and maybe I could solve thousands of users' problems versus just that one user's problem.
That's right. So I love these questions that really get at these kind of core tensions that are really tough when building a business, when building your product. And this also comes up. So have you ever had to abandon a customer segment or fire a customer? How did you decide that this was the right decision? How did you know that this issue was emerging at your startup? Let's go to you, Brian, for this one.
I was going to wrestle the mic away from you just so that I can give a shot at answering that question. So thank you, Gary. Yes, it is okay to fire a customer. So again, I won't mention the product, but we had a customer for a product I was managing. And, while we, it was our highest paying customer. Okay, so it was a really hard conversation to have, but the highest paying customer came with the notion that we would customize the product to very specific scenarios that were unique to them. Now, yes, there was a common playing field of scenarios that were that a few of our other customers were open to, as well as we were providing value on. But engineering resources are finite. Financial resources are finite. Time is finite. Our product roadmap is not a customer roadmap. A customer roadmap is a customer pipeline, but a product roadmap is what we're building in the product, right? And so this customer, again, very good customer, heavy user. As I said, one of the highest paying customer for sure. But the demands for customization on the product were increasing. And it came to a point where we were getting distracted. As I said, the almighty dollar can be very distracting sometimes. And so being able to, first of all, convince our sales team that we need to learn to say no, right? And then from the sales team, then convincing the customer success team that we need to learn to say no. And so it was funny, there was more of an internal battle on that, because as you can imagine, rightfully so, right? Sales comps are tied to this kind of stuff and customer success metrics and whatnot. But the level of customers was just increasing. And, we had conversations with the customer being that, listen, we might be able to do this. We need to do some research to see if this is what we're seeing with all our customers before we put any resources behind it. And, that was our gentle nudge of saying, you're not our only customer, right? And so that we did that a few times, and still there was this like, hey, this isn't working. And this was a feature that they asked that they wanted to look very closely to what they wanted to use. So at the end of it, we didn't like fire the customer. What we did say is that, hey, this is our product roadmap. You're an important customer to us. Here's our product roadmap. Here are the features that we're looking to build and the time frame we're looking to build, and it involves a lot of due diligence, a lot of customer research. Unfortunately, we cannot get to these specific asks that you have in the time frame that you have, and some of them are on the roadmap. Some of them are frankly not, because it's a very unique issue that you're having. And obviously the customer was not very happy to hear that. And like, well, we don't know how we can continue using this product in the long run and blah, blah. And we were like, yeah, totally understand it. So eventually that customer did get off the platform, and we helped with the offboarding very nicely, and that was fine. But let me just say though, we our customer acquisition target, we met our customer acquisition targets that quarter because we were building for a large base of customers. And that is super critical. So losing one very high paying customer, but gathering more customers, this is the one time where I was like, I love customer lifetime value, because we are end of lifing one customer, but we are starting new lives, so to speak, of these other 6-7 customers that are that like our product roadmap, and are willing to come with us on that journey. So yeah, so I will say, for anyone thinking of doing this, any founder thinking of doing this, the hardest battle you're going to have is internally with your sales team, your customer success team, to convince them that this is the right way to go. You're going to have to protect your product teams really, really well. And yeah, that's mine.
Brian, I like what you said. Engaging, I mean, sometimes you won't win. You will be forced to kind of, have a customer exit. But engaging the customer and helping them to understand what your constraints are, and that they actually want you to succeed and win on a larger scale, not just solve their problem. And most customers would recognize that if you bring them into your world, you don't want us to just serve you, because we won't survive. We'll be out of business, and then you will really be in trouble. Wouldn't it be better for everybody if we built for more? And we'll try and incorporate some of your requirements, but some may not. By the way, quick aside, I was running product for $1 billion company on the West Coast, and the senior VP of sales was in my office screaming at me for features that he needed to close business for that quarter. That's a very powerful time for a product person. And there's a way around that problem if you ever experience that. And Brian, I don't know if you've had this, where the sales team is pretty powerful. In this company, sales was even more powerful than product, which was a cultural issue. But that aside, I actually turned it back on him and challenged him. I said, you know something, I'm confident enough in your abilities that you'll get this business closed without that capability. Go show me you can get it done. So sometimes you just have to push back, play tough. He got the business closed without the feature, and we didn't distort the pipeline, the product roadmap in doing so.
I feel like this is an important enough point that I have to pile on, which is that
Please.
Often as a product person, you're negotiating with sales. Starting sort of earlier than that, I would make the point that early on, the chief salesperson and head of product should be the CEO in a lot of ways, or at least one of the founders, because that is a person who is strong enough to be able to say no, right? To customers that are not of strategic importance. Like, very few other people, as your company grows, are going to be in a position to say no. So it's all about incentives, both internally and externally. But I've also been in that position where I was in a room and getting screamed at by sales as a head of product, just like newsflash, all of you who are in product. This either has or will happen to you. And one of the tools I would use, I mean, I also used that tactic, Jeffrey, which was just like, hey, I trust your ability to do this other way. But furthermore, I always use it as a argument about resourcing, right? And I was like, all right, here's the roadmap. Here's what you're asking for. What do you want me to say no to so that we can say yes to this thing you want me to build? Which of the other things you sales have asked for would you like to trade off? And here's how, and show them the Gantt chart. Here's how this gets moved out. If we say no to this now, we'd have to do it later. If we say yes to this now, etc. Like, help them understand that resources are finite and that product and technology folks are not magicians pulling rabbits out of hats. Like, it takes resources, it takes time. Just let's make the decision strategically together. We all are rowing in the same direction, right? I would often try to get customer support into that conversation too, because we all had pieces of that puzzle, different pieces of that puzzle, and without one of those voices, we were apt to really miss something. And I wanted to be able to collaborate with them on making those trade-offs. So often making them horse trade with themselves was always a really good tactic, which is just like, hey, here's our roadmap filled with other things you've asked me for. which of these things would you like to boot out of here for this thing you're asking me for now?
This
Love
is something that I'm dealing with right now. I can't speak about it directly, but I had a sales team that said the product needs to be red. And then I have another group of stakeholders that said, no, the product needs to be blue. And the right call in this particular case is that it needed to be blue. So I had the sales team yelling at me as well. So of course, in a positive way. But yeah, it's a classic conflict that comes up. And then just kind of wrap up one more interesting conflict before we get to the audience questions here. Jordan, since you were talking about the founder here, so suppose you have a difference of opinion in customer acquisition than your startup's founder. The startup's founder is very influential. They're often the sales and the product person in the beginning. How have you seen this conflict navigated, and how have you seen startups maybe not succeed in this circumstance?
Oh boy.
Oh boy,
Have I seen
this is
this?
going to fill the remainder of the time.
Okay.
I know. This often happens, and I kind of want to focus on the positive here, which is that the best way to solve such conflicts is through experimentation and data, right? Okay, you've got a hypothesis. Let's run a sprint with yours, and then let's run a sprint with mine, and may the best ideas here, the best focus win. Maybe you're disagreeing with a founder about your ideal customer persona. Maybe you're disagreeing with them about acquisition channels. You know, the opportunities for disagreement are myriad. But I would say, you know, as long as you agree on that North Star. Now, if you can't agree on that, there's no solving that. If you disagree with your founding team or your leadership about like where the mission or the vision, that's just, you can't solve that. Okay. But with regard to sort of like how you're going to get there and with whom, I would say just, you know, time box it. Say, hey, let's devote this amount of resources to this idea with this experiment. Maybe we're going to do a certain number of outreach messages and interviews, et cetera. Like, here's what a yes would mean. Here's how we would know this was good, and here's how we would know it was not good. And let's just do them, and do them both, and then really look at the data together. And that is frankly the only way, and it's honestly the only way to disagree with yourself. You should be doing that with your own hypotheses, even when you're agreeing with you, but your hypothesis might be wrong, right? So it's really about running the experiments and looking at the data, but having that shared value system behind it. If there isn't that shared value system, if you aren't in agreement about where the market is going and like who to serve in that market, that's a fundamental disagreement that you might be able to like run a parallel path together for a while, but it's going to conflict eventually.
As rich as that question is, maybe we can touch on it a little bit in a bit, but we'd like to open up the audience for questions.
And we can start. We've got one online, Gary, so I'll throw this one out. It's about the beginning. When the MVP is ready, this comes from Angela Sanchez, and you are trying to get your first pilot or customer. What would be the best answer when they ask you who else is using this product if nobody else is using this product? And she's coming particularly from the construction industry and introducing technology, but general question, everybody.
Question back to Angela. Did you build the product with a customer profile in mind or a specific set of customers in mind? Did you have some opportunities to interview customers before you went and built the MVP? I'm going to turn it around as a question. Is Angela online? Can we answer? Maybe. Hopefully she's still here. I would hope there are.
She interviewed customers before.
She did. Okay. So I would say we've spoken with many customers that have formed the basis for our MVP and what we've built today, and they provided ample feedback to what we're doing. And I would kind of dodge the question, I guess, is what I would do. I don't know if others would do the same.
This is why I think it's a loosely used, but like, design partners, right? A lot of startups love having design partners.
Thank you,
design
Brian.
partners that And this is the reason why, is because when you have a design partner, you can, reference like they did it, so you do it, kind of thing. I would say, Angela, yes, it's a tough situation to be. Obviously, don't lie. Don't say you have customers. But a good place to start here is to really focus on the need and how it is going to get solved for that customer. If they ask the question, who else is using it? Be honest, being like, listen, we have identified a certain type of customer to be our target customers for this product. You fit that profile really well, and here is why. And
actually, now that I think about it, Brian, there's nothing wrong with saying we are very early. We are just getting started. You're bleeding edge, and we're trying to get users on the platform.
Yep, exactly.
Sometimes that might actually pull a customer in to say, wow, you're going to be listening to me then. Yeah, I want to try this. Or I see myself as an early adopter.
Exactly. And that's the part where, it's important to target your customers well. That's more on you to make sure you need to find the progressive types, especially in archaic industries.
Yeah.
Well, archaic in a nice way. In construction, you need to find the progressive types who, when you tug on that emotion of being early adopters, will be like, yeah, that's exactly where we are headed. Thank you. And call them a design partner, because it's not a bad word when you're actually saying, listen, you are our first customer. We want to build this product but we want to keep customers like you in mind. So it's not impossible, and no customer should feel like, oh, you don't have anyone else. And if the other early adopter types, they will not push back on that. They will instead focus more on the solution, focus more on the problem. If you do get that pushback, you're likely speaking to the wrong customer.
That last part is exactly what I was going to jump in and say. This might be a case of saying no to the wrong customer. If they don't have the pain point so badly that they, 2 minutes into your first call with them are like, please take my money, please solve this problem for me, then they probably aren't your best first customer.
Anyone in the room? We got about 5 minutes so we can take questions about getting your first customers. I know we get a lot of founders. Getting your first customers, keeping those first customers.
Here we go.
Name and...
Hey there, I'm Louis Cherignano from Winchester, Mass. I'm the founder and CEO of FAM Social Finance, an online travel platform for people saving up for their next major trip. We have about 45 people on the platform right now. We're direct to consumer. Most of them have come from within my own network, and I'm expanding into various social media platforms to try to adopt the next batch of users. I'm hitting a lot of firewalls where on Reddit and Facebook, there's a lot of admin monitoring that doesn't let me do any self-promoting. So I'm having trouble reaching anybody without sending scammy direct messaging. Is there any advice for early bootstrapping?
Like a Jordan
I'm
question.
curious. Yeah, I'm curious if there's a moment, a customer journey moment you could insert yourself into, and maybe even in the real world, a place you could go where people are having the problem that you're solving, and it in exactly that moment. You can be there hanging out virtually or in real life in a way that just naturally fits and isn't spammy or scammy. Really looking for that opportunity. Like, what is the moment where people are going to be looking for this solution, and just making sure that you're sitting right there in a very friendly way with the solution in hand. I don't know a ton about what you're doing, so I can't brainstorm that with you at this moment, but that's where I would be looking.
I appreciate it. I think it's good advice.
Sounds like travel companies would benefit from this as well. Is there a way to get others to deliver your message on your behalf? I know that's hard, but to the extent you can find, like, by providing this service, you're enabling something that benefits a third party.
Yeah, we actually partner with language apps, and we have LOIs signed with a few of them. We're just trying to figure out how do we get like the first 1,000 users on, because the language apps all want a little bit early traction.
More traction, yeah.
But I think that's good advice. I'm going to go in person. Maybe I'll go to an airport.
Yeah, I immediately thought of an airport. Just hang out.
I don't know if you can do that today anymore, Jordan. I think you need an actual ticket to hang out in an airport.
Not pre-security. You can hang out.
Okay.
You can hang out.
Hi, I'm a technical founder, and I find it easy to talk to potential customers about product and problems they need to solve. But I find it difficult to talk about the basically charging them some money for the service. So mentally, how can I approach this to kind of break this barrier and be kind of practical with building the business side of things, not just the product side of things? I'm Andre Rodulescu-Cubano. Thank you.
Pricing is a challenge and charging is a challenge, Andre. But turn it around. Your customers want you to survive. They want you to be around. They recognize unless you have a source of revenue, you're not going to be around. So they're not going to commit to use your product if they don't think you have sustainability, right? So I think turn it around and have a general answer to your pricing question. And this is hard. This is a topic for another panel. But to say, here's our pricing model. Here's how we charge. You could, if you wanted to, say, look, for 30 days or some reduced function, we have a very attractive offer. That sometimes softens it a little bit. But you're sharing with them, at some point, they're going to need to pay. And what is it they need to do that they're going to need to pay? And everybody pays at some point, or else they don't get the service any longer. But try and, again, do what we've been talking about. Turn the tables a little bit, make the customer a partner of yours, and recognize that they should be wanting to pay you so that you actually can be successful.
Great. We've got about 2 minutes, so this could be the last question.
Oh, that was it. Okay.
I was going to jump in there a second, but as a technical co-founder, I just want to say I feel you on this. And I actually have a very specific thing I would do with myself to get myself into the headspace for that. So like, ping me later. We should talk about this.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Tom Marlowe. I have a network for matching co-founders. And we have, it's a freemium model. And for the upgraded account, we tend to see users stick around for, I don't know, 6, 9, maybe 12 months because they use it and then it works and then they go on and do something else.
They don't need you anymore.
Yeah,
the dating app problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I'm struggling with, do I focus the efforts on just bringing in more users, or do I also try to look at, are there ways to maintain customers longer? Kind of a tricky spot. Or do I just kind of say, there's going to be that churn and it's natural? Any thoughts?
Is there other value you can provide to the users after they've found a co-founder? Or value they could provide to you? Maybe there's a way to encourage them to suggest other people to be on the platform, and you can share incentives back with them somehow, right? But figuring out what's the value prop post finding a founder would be where I'd start with that question.
That's good. I like that.
Okay.
Yeah, take a look at actually Amy Boutwell asked a very similar question. So maybe you two should connect because she's looking for a place where she can find co-founders. So I've been involved with the YC community for quite some time. They have this, it's called YC Startup School, but as part of Startup School, they have YC co-founder matching. And I've seen that what they've done is very similar to what Jeffrey was alluding to, which is not only do you find co-founders on it, but they have wisdom to share. Like, you go through these courses to get good on finance or startup operations or whatever. So you have people coming back to get information, to see what's happening in the network. So yeah, check it out. I think you might find some ideas in terms of how they are bringing users back to the portal because they are.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have. Jordan, Brian, Jeffrey, and Gary, that was a wonderful session. Tons of insights in there, nuggets. I hope everybody enjoyed that.